I speak to you in the name of the one God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Friends, the title of my sermon this morning is, You Just Don't Understand Me. Now, this second Sunday of Christmas is always tricky because it comes before Epiphany. And so most years we read the story of the Magi's visit to the Christ child. But every third year, we get to read the reading from Luke. So I felt like it was important to read the reading from Luke. This sermon will also explain to you why that color picture of that icon is in your bulletin. You might want to pull that out. Why were you looking for me? Didn't you know I would be in my Father's house? I have a question for all the children in the congregation. How many of you think that if you answered your mother with that kind of answer, you would be in really big trouble? Especially big trouble if your father was standing there and he could hear you talking to your mother like that and they had just spent 3 days looking for you. I don't think it would go particularly well. It sure wouldn't have in my household. Now, when I was a child, I used to plague my Sunday school teachers with stories about this, or questions about this particular story. What did Jesus eat when he was alone in the city for 3 days? Where did he sleep? And most of all, why wasn't his answer to his mother the kind of thing that my mother would have called smart-mouthed? Why could Jesus talk to his mother like that and it wasn't a sin, but if I had talked to my mother like that, it certainly would have been? Now, I've been a mother for many years, and I've raised 3 12-year-olds of my own, and I have to tell you, there would have been serious consequences for any child of mine that answered me like that after being gone for 3 days and scaring me right down to my shoe tops. I would not be inclined to be very understanding. Now, Luke tries to make this story seem kind of like a straightforward story about the boy Jesus in the temple and a little sweet. But you know, he can't avoid the fact that Mary and Joseph did not understand what Jesus said to them. Now, sooner or later, if you've been a parent, you experience that heart-stopping moment of panic in a crowd when you realize that you don't know exactly where your little child is. And it's a powerfully clarifying moment because you now know that your heart is no longer your own, that any possibility you have of any sense of well-being depends forevermore on the well-being of your child. And you also realize at the same time that that child is a person with ideas of his or her own who is going to explore and going to take risks. And although your child is terribly, terribly vulnerable in a chaotic world, there's really not that much you can do to protect them. So suddenly, in that single instant, every complacent sense of security you ever had is just ripped away. And if you're lucky, it lasts only a minute until you glimpse the little head in the crowd and you see the little jacket that's the right color and the hair is the right color, and you sink to your knees and you wrap your child up in your arms until your heart stops pounding so very hard. But imagine a whole day and a night and another whole day and another night. Mary and Joseph searched the city for 3 days, and their beautiful 12-year-old boy was missing in a dangerous and chaotic place. The city was full of strangers and pilgrims and travelers, as well as thieves and grifters who preyed upon them, the possibility that they would never find him again grew with every passing minute. He was gone, and they couldn't figure out what had happened to him. Now, I wonder if when they finally went to the temple, they went because they realized that their search for the child had become futile. And they went to face the truth before God, that this beautiful child that they had been entrusted with to love and care for and raise was gone, that they'd lost him. And so they went to the place where they had brought him so many years before, then in thanksgiving and joy, and now in unspeakable grief. Imagine as they entered the temple, they passed a circle of teachers gathered in deep discussion, and their bearded faces and gray heads bent to listen. And from among them, they heard not the deep, scholarly voice of another one of the graybeards, but the light, musical voice of a child. And they turned to look, and there was a small head at the right height, with hair just the right color, and wearing the clothes his mother had made for him. And there he was. No longer lost, there he was. But Jesus, apparently, when he sees his parents, he doesn't come running to them with apologies and explanations. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to make you worry. He seems to be completely unaware of the agony that he caused them. What he says sounds exactly like a normal 12-year-old who sees things really only from his point of view. Why were you searching for me? Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house? Those are the last words we have from Jesus until he reappears in the Gospels as a fully grown man. And I really do wonder if maybe for the intervening 18 years he wasn't permanently grounded. Now, I've undoubtedly figured out by now that when I preach, I rarely tire of making the point that Jesus was fully human and fully divine, God with us. And this season of Christmastide is the celebration of God's incarnation as a human. Jesus was a normal man, a normal human being in all ways, except that he did not give in to the temptations that plague all of us. So how do we go reconciling that with the story of a 12-year-old who stays in the city without telling his mother, and then appears unrepentant and unconcerned when they finally find him? All the explanations I've ever heard for Jesus' behavior and Mary and Joseph's reaction in this story have made them so supernaturally nice. And that niceness misses the point. That's the reason that icon is in your bulletin. It's the first piece of artwork that I have ever seen that actually shows something like what I think might have really happened. It's called The Boy Jesus. The Boy Jesus returns to his parents after disputing with the doctors in the temple. The first time I ever saw that painting, I thought, somebody understood what was going there. You know, the boy Jesus was a normal little boy. His mother had to teach him to comb his hair and to take a bath and not to track mud into the house or to chew with his mouth closed, to keep his elbows off the table. He had to learn arithmetic and spelling and to mind his manners. And he didn't go to school just because he was much too polite to show off his divine knowledge. He went to learn. And his mother didn't know for sure, not for sure, that the face that she kissed and wiped and the eyes that looked like hers and that curly little head were the face and hair and eyes of God. What his mother knew was that God had promised her that this child would be called the Son of the Most High. And in her faith and her trust in God's promise, she risked her life to make that promise real. All the other things she had seen and heard regarding the child she kept in her heart, and she pondered them, but she didn't necessarily understand. And this story shows Jesus in a critical moment in his growing up. It's a moment that happens to each of us sooner or later. It's the moment when we come to realize that even those we love and trust do not understand and cannot be expected to. It's the moment when we find out that each of us stands alone and that we're unique. And we find that our ability to understand and to be understood is far more limited than we had ever thought. Now, if you look at the icon, Mary sits on a stool, and her cheeks are flushed, and her hands are extended, like she collapsed there in a flood of relief and anger. And the boy Jesus stands there with his arms crossed and his lower lip stuck out, and an angry glint in his eye. I don't know, has any mother here ever seen that expression on her child? And Joseph stands with one hand on Jesus' shoulder. You know, the dad grip. And he's looking at Jesus and really sternly to say, look what you did to your mother. Clearly, it's a family in the middle of a difficult situation. They're not being supernaturally nice to one another. They are quite put out with one another. Geez, Mom, what's the big deal? You should have known where I would be. And that's the problem. Somewhere around 12, we realize that our parents, whom we've been convinced all their lives have eyes in the back of their head and they can see and know everything that we do, they don't really. And they don't always understand. Certainly no family in the world shared more love than Mary and Joseph and Jesus. But even then, they didn't always understand one another. Love does not always mean understanding. And even when Jesus grew to be a man, his family didn't understand him. At some point in his public ministry, Jesus' mother and his brothers and sisters show up to take him home, saying he was beside himself, apparently thinking he'd really gone off the deep end and needed to come home and live quietly and eccentric in seclusion. They loved him, but they didn't understand. The disciples loved him, but they didn't understand. Now, it's no sin for Jesus to act like a 12-year-old because that is what he was. He expected and wanted his parents to understand something he probably didn't understand himself, and he was undoubtedly frustrated. But my love and your love, even his parents' love, cannot be all-knowing and all-fulfilling. It doesn't mean, however, that we don't love. Failure to understand one another isn't a sin. Failure to share ourselves openly, failure to love, those lead to sin. The shadow of the cross falls over the young Jesus in this story. He will be misunderstood, he will be abandoned, he will be denied, he will be betrayed by those who think they love him. And the good news is, though, that Jesus understands us completely, he never, ever makes complete understanding a requirement for our love of him. The disciples' understanding of Christ isn't perfect, nor is ours. If we had to understand first before we loved, we would be lost. Jesus doesn't interrogate you or me first to say whether, to find out whether or not we meet his qualifications. whether or not we understand him, his only question to us, and it will be the question from now until Easter, is, will you follow me? And the only test of discipleship, if there is a test, is the willingness to be there, to follow Jesus as Lord no matter what happens, to share our destiny with him, and to allow him to share his destiny with us. You don't have to understand. You just have to go along.